These days in evangelical Christianity, really in the psyche of the American conscience, the pastor who is successful, he has a resume that is so impressive. So many people attend his church. He's sold so many books. He speaks at all the big conferences. Now that is a successful pastor. While that may of course be true, is that the biblical model for a pastor? That everything looks great. Everything is perfect on the outside. When he presents himself on Sunday morning, you would think that this man just rode to church on a white stallion with people laying down fronds, palm branches, because it's just so amazing, this guy. Is that the biblical model for a pastor? It's not. And yet I fear too many pastors have adopted that mindset or made that their goal to look like that. And the result is we, the body, have been following the head. We feel the same way, don't we? Everything on Facebook, it's so much better in their family. Everybody's always smiling in the pictures. Everybody looks really they take those vacations. Oh, they're on a missions trip. Oh, I'm not a worthwhile Christian at all. There is a worldly mindset that pressures both pastors and people, telling us, demanding of us, look perfect, look spanky, look on point all the time, or you are not what you are supposed to be, and that message is not biblical.
There is a fundamentally disproportionate relationship between the glory of the New Covenant message and the glory of the New Covenant messenger. There is a fundamental contrast between the glory of the New Covenant ministry and the shame of the New Covenant minister.
Is the truth somewhere in the middle between pastor humility and pastor superstar? Is what I'm trying to say. Should a pastor be humble? Yes. Should a pastor be confident? Yes. But the question is, in what? And that goes for you and me too in our walk. Let's just forget pastors for a second. Let's just talk about us. We're just going through the day. Do you feel like you are totally weak, worthless? Your faith is smaller than a mustard seed? God's not going to use somebody like you. Do you have that sense? Or do you have the sense that, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. If I just put my mind to it and apply myself, I can do anything that I want to. That attitude also is absolutely wrong. So where is the balance? Perhaps Mike Riccardi can help us in understanding what we are to look like so that something else can look even better.
We are not the fine china that people parade out to impress their dinner guests. We are the ordinary, unremarkable, fragile, expendable earthen vessels. We're not the high-powered, put-together, well-respected, perfectly polished cultural elite. Remember what Paul had already told the Corinthians in the first letter, 1 Corinthians 1:26, that when we were called, there were not many mighty among you. There were not many noble. But God has chosen the foolish things, the weak things, the base and the despised things, and the things that are not, literally the nobodies, so that he might nullify the things that are, so that no man may boast.
The living water is not contained in Waterford crystal. The living water is contained in pots, clay pots, non-decorative pots, the base, the common pot, and that is exactly what we are to look like. The earthen vessel, whether pastor or lay person, whose contents are eternally valuable.
God entrusts the priceless treasure of the gospel to be borne by insignificant, frail, unattractive earthen vessels so that when something amazing happens, when the gospel does its work and hearts are awakened and affections are renewed and wills are transformed, when eyes are open and when the aroma of Jesus starts to finally smell like life, there will be no doubt who is responsible. There will be no doubt about where that kind of transforming power came from.
These days, most pastors, dare I say, aren't interested in that. They feel the pressure from the world to be a superstar. If Paul were alive today and his resume were put on the internet, most people would esteem him as an abysmal failure.
The ministry gurus who had infiltrated the church in Corinth see Paul get stoned, and they say, how could you conclude anything other than this guy is under God's judgment? I mean, stoned? Come on. But when Paul just gets up and walks away, is there any doubt about where the power for his ministry comes from? It's brilliant. God has specifically designed that his messengers be weak so that he can show off his power, his treasure in the gospel message.
Not just for pastors, that message. The balance of humility and weakness, we should have that in spades. And yet we have a confidence not in ourselves so that we can boast, but in God. Does this mean some sort of outward piety like a Pharisee, which frankly didn't look all that humble? No, that's not what God is looking for. Does this mean that I should never clean up, shave, get ready for the day? No, it doesn't mean that either. But our confidence is not in clothing. Our confidence is in Christ, to do great things even though we are dressed in rags or we look like we are very rich. It's not we who should be getting the attention. It is He. Yes, I wrote that.
The false apostles are looking at Paul and saying, he can't be identified with Jesus because he suffers so much. And Paul says it's those very sufferings that are precisely what identify him with Jesus. And it's here that we recognize just the height of the absurdity of the false apostles' theology of glory, their health, wealth, and prosperity model for ministry. The height of the stupidity of the professionalized corporate success model for ministry. If suffering and weakness and lack of polish disqualify you from ministry, what do these charlatans think of Jesus? He certainly didn't enjoy the finer comforts of this world. Paul's argument is basically to point to Christ and say the world hated my master, now they hate his slaves.